and behind them both sat an old Drevox historian named Grath Dune, brought along because he was one of the few beings left alive who remembered anything real about the first contact with humanity. "Tell me again," Naira said, turning to the old Drevox. "Tell me exactly what happened 200 years ago. I have read the reports, but reports never tell the full truth. You were there. You saw it happen." Grath Dune sighed, his heavy shoulders sinking slightly. He was very old for a Drevox, his armored skin faded and cracked in places, like old stone. But his mind was still sharp, and his memory of that day had never faded, no matter how many years passed. "It began with hope," Grath said slowly. "Real hope. When the Council first discovered Earth, we were amazed. Humans were primitive, yes, only beginning to explore their own solar system. But they were clever, faster learners than any species we had ever studied. Within 50 years of first contact, they had already built ships that could travel between stars. Technology it took most species centuries to develop on their own." "Then why did we not treat them with respect?" Naira asked quietly. Grath's eyes darkened with old shame. "Because we were afraid of what they might become. A species that learns that fast, that grows that quickly. Some council members saw it as a threat, not a wonder. So when humans were finally invited to join the council, we did not offer them equal status. We offered them what we called a provisional seat, a junior position. A place at the table, yes, but with no real voice, no real vote. They would sit and listen, but their opinions would carry no weight until the council decided at some future date that they had proven themselves worthy of true membership." Naira frowned. "That is insulting." "It was meant to be," Grath admitted. "Not cruel exactly, but careful, controlled. We wanted humans close enough to watch, but not close enough to challenge our authority. We thought they would be grateful simply to have a seat at all, even an empty one in practice." "But they were not grateful," Naira said. "No," Grath said, a small, sad smile crossing his weathered face. "They were not." He looked out at the stars, remembering. "I was young then, newly appointed to the council. I remember the day the human delegation arrived at Vareth Prime. 3 humans. Their leader was a woman named Elena Reyes, president of what they called the United Earth Assembly. She was small compared to most council species, no special powers, no armor, nothing but a simple gray suit and calm, steady eyes. When the provisional seat was offered to her formally in front of the entire council, she did not react in anger. She did not shout or argue. She simply stood very still for a long moment, looking at the empty chair we had prepared for her, the one with the golden Earth plaque. And then she looked around at all of us." Grath paused, remembering the exact words that had echoed through the great hall that day. She said, "You have offered my people a chair but not a voice, a seat at your table but no respect in your decisions. We came here hoping to join a community of equals. Instead, you offer us a position lower than your youngest members, simply because you fear how quickly we have grown." "Then what happened?" Naira asked, leaning forward. "Then she said something none of us ever forgot," Grath continued. "She said, 'We don't need a seat you don't respect. We will build our own table.' And then she turned, and she walked out of the Great Hall, followed by the other 2 human representatives. They did not return to their ship in anger. They did not threaten war. They simply left, calm and quiet, and they never came back." The ship was silent for a moment after Grath finished his story. Even Kellen Dre, the young Zorlak officer who had said little during the entire journey, seemed thoughtful now. 200 years, Naira said softly. 200 years, and we forgot the true reason. We told ourselves they were cowards. We told ourselves they were weak. But they left because we insulted them, and we simply erased that part of the story because it was easier than admitting our own mistake. History is often rewritten by those who are ashamed of it, Grath said quietly. Kellen shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. If what you say is true, then humans may not welcome us warmly when we arrive. They may see this as another insult, coming to them now, only when we need something from them. That is a real risk, Naira admitted. But it is a risk we must take. Billions of lives are at stake. If humans can help us against the Devourer, we must at least try to make things right and ask. Grath nodded slowly. There is something else you should know before we arrive. Something the old records only hint at, but I have always believed to be true. What is that? Nira asked. After humans left the Council 200 years ago, we largely stopped watching them, Grath said. Our scouts checked on Earth occasionally in the first few decades, but as time passed and other crises took our attention, we simply forgot about them. The last confirmed report on human technology and population is over 150 years old. Nira's eyes widened slightly. 150 years? That is a very long time for a species that was already learning faster than any other species we had studied. Exactly, Grath said. We do not know what humans have become in that time. We do not know their current technology, their current population, their current strength. We are flying toward the unknown, Counselor. We must be ready for anything. The ship's navigation system chimed softly, indicating final preparations for the jump were complete. Outside the viewport, space began to bend and twist as the engines powered up. Prepare for jump, the ship's computer announced calmly. Arrival at designated coordinates in 3, 2, 1. The stars stretched into long lines of light, and then everything went white for a brief moment as the Aurelian's hope tore through the fabric of space itself. When the light faded and the stars returned to their normal pinpoint shapes, the crew of the Aurelian's hope found themselves staring at something none of them had expected. That cannot be right, Kellen said, his voice tight with confusion as he checked his instruments again. According to our old records, we should be approaching an empty region of space with a single yellow star and one habitable planet. Minimal technology, no significant orbital structures. But that was not what the viewport showed. Ahead of the ship, spread across the space around the yellow star, was a sight that made even old Grath Dune rise slowly from his seat in stunned silence. Massive structures orbited the system, gleaming stations larger than any Council starbase Nira had ever seen. Sleek warships, dozens of them, moved in careful patrol patterns between the structures, their designs unlike anything in the Council's database, elegant yet clearly powerful. Between the third and fourth planets, a shimmering ring of technology stretched across space, some kind of massive construction project, its true purpose unclear from this distance. And there, in the center of it all, the blue and green planet the old records called Earth, glowing softly with the lights of countless cities, more advanced and more numerous than anything the 200-year-old reports had described. This is impossible, Kellen whispered. This level of technology should not exist, not from a species we considered primitive 200 years ago. Nira stared at the screen, her mind racing. The stories were true then. Humans had not faded away in isolation. They had not been forgotten because they had failed. They had been forgotten because the Council had simply stopped paying attention, while humanity quietly, steadily, became something far greater than anyone had expected. Incoming transmission, the ship's computer announced suddenly. The three Council representatives exchanged nervous glances. Put it through, Nira said, straightening in her seat, trying to appear calm despite the pounding of her heart. The screen flickered, and an image appeared. A human face, calm and composed, looked out at them. It was a woman, middle-aged, with short dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Unlike the frightened or curious expressions Nira had expected, this woman's face showed only quiet alertness, the look of someone who had been expecting a moment like this for a very long time. Unidentified vessel, the woman said, her voice steady and calm. You have entered Sol system space without prior notice or clearance. Please identify yourselves and state your purpose immediately. Nira took a deep breath before responding. This is Counselor Nira Vess of the Galactic Council, aboard the vessel Aurelian's Hope. We come in peace, seeking to reopen communication with the people of Earth. The woman on the screen studied them for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Behind her, Nira could see the edges of what looked like a command center, filled with humans working calmly at various stations, occasionally glancing toward the main screen with quiet curiosity. But no real alarm. The Galactic Council, the woman repeated slowly, as if testing the weight of the words. It has been 203 years since any representative of the Council has attempted contact with Earth. We are aware, Naira said carefully, and we understand if there is hesitation, given the history between our peoples. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, though her expression remained calm. History between our peoples, she repeated. That is one way to describe it, Counselor. There was a tense silence. I am Commander Sarah Chen, the woman finally said, head of Earth Defense Command for this sector. I will need to consult with Earth's leadership before granting your vessel permission to approach the planet. In the meantime, you will maintain your current position and power down all weapon systems. Is that understood? Understood, Naira said immediately. We have no weapon systems active, Commander. We come only to talk. Commander Chen studied them for another long moment, then gave a small nod. Very well. Maintain position. I will contact you again shortly. The transmission ended, the screen going dark. Kellen let out a breath he had apparently been holding. Did you see the technology on their ships? The design of their stations? That is not the technology of a species we simply invited to a lesser seat 200 years ago. That is the technology of a species that could, quite possibly, be equal to or beyond our own capabilities now. Or greater, Grath said quietly, still staring at the screen with something like awe in his ancient eyes. Much greater. Nira sat back in her chair, her mind working through the implications of what they had just seen. 200 years ago, the Council had turned away a species out of fear that they were growing too quickly, too strong, too capable. And in response to that insult, humanity had not faded away in bitterness. They had not stayed weak and small as the old, comfortable stories suggested. Instead, they had grown into something the entire galaxy had failed to notice. Something powerful. Something advanced. Something that had, quite possibly, surpassed the very species that had once looked down upon them. We were wrong about them, Nira said softly, more to herself than to the others. Completely wrong. And now we are here, asking for their help, after 200 years of forgetting they even existed. Do you think they will help us? Kellen asked, his earlier confidence replaced by genuine uncertainty. After everything that happened? Naira did not answer immediately. She thought of Elena Reyes, the human leader from 200 years ago, and the words she had spoken before walking out of the Great Hall forever. We don't need a seat you don't respect. We will build our own table. Looking at the massive structures orbiting Earth, the powerful warships patrolling the system, the glowing lights of countless advanced cities spread across the planet below, Naira realized something important. Humans had done exactly what Elena Reyes promised. They had built their own table, a table far grander than anything the Council could have imagined 2 centuries ago. The only question now was whether humanity would be willing to sit down with the very people who had once refused to treat them as equals. I do not know if they will help us, Naira finally admitted. But I believe if there is any hope for the Council against the Devourer, it will only come if we are honest with them. If we admit our mistake, fully and completely, and ask for their help not as superiors granting a favor, but as equals seeking assistance. Grath nodded slowly in agreement. That will require humility, Counselor. True humility. Something this Council has not shown in a very long time. Before Naira could respond, the ship's communication system chimed once more. Incoming transmission, the computer announced. The screen flickered back to life, showing Commander Sarah Chen once again. Her expression had changed slightly, though it was still carefully controlled. Counselor Vess, she said. I have spoken with Earth's leadership. Your vessel has been granted permission to approach the planet under escort. You will be received at the Earth Assembly headquarters. Naira felt a small wave of relief. Thank you, Commander. We appreciate the opportunity to speak. Do not thank me yet, Counselor, Commander Chen said, her voice suddenly sharper, more serious. You should know that Earth's current leadership is well aware of why your council has likely come here after 200 years of silence. We have been monitoring the situation at the edge of council space for several months now. Naira's eyes widened slightly. You know about the Devourer? We know a great deal about many things, Counselor, Commander Chen said, a faint, unreadable expression crossing her face. Prepare your vessel. Escort ships will arrive shortly to guide you to the surface. The transmission ended once more, leaving the 3 council representatives in stunned silence. They already knew, Kellen said slowly. They knew about the threat before we even arrived to ask for help. Which means, Grath added quietly, that humanity has been watching us far more closely than we have ever watched them these past 200 years. Naira stared out at the massive structures surrounding Earth, at the powerful warships moving in silent, disciplined patterns, at the glowing lights of a civilization the Council had dismissed as primitive and forgotten. She thought again of the empty chair back in the Great Hall of Vareth Prime, gathering dust for 2 centuries, while humanity quietly built something far greater than anyone in the Council had ever imagined. We came here believing we were bringing an opportunity to a struggling, forgotten species, Naira said softly. But I fear, counselors, that we may have gravely underestimated exactly who we are about to meet. As escort ships appeared on the viewport, sleek and powerful, guiding the Aurelian's Hope gently toward the glowing blue and green planet below, Naira Vess felt a mixture of hope and fear settling deep in her chest. The galaxy had spent 200 years believing humanity was gone, forgotten, insignificant. They were about to learn just how wrong that belief truly was. The escort ships guided the Aurelian's Hope down through Earth's atmosphere with smooth, practiced precision. Naira Vess pressed close to the viewport, watching as clouds parted below them to reveal a city unlike anything described in the Council's old records. Towers rose into the sky, some so tall their peaks disappeared into low clouds. Bridges of light connected buildings hundreds of meters apart, glowing softly even in daylight. Vehicles moved silently through the air between the towers. No visible engines, no exhaust, no sound at all. Green spaces spread across rooftops and between buildings, trees and gardens woven carefully into the design of the city itself, as if nature and technology had learned to live together in perfect balance. This is New Geneva, Grath Dune said quietly, checking a small display built into his seat. According to what little information we still have, it was a minor city 200 years ago. Now it appears to be some kind of capital. Everything is different, Kellen murmured, still staring out the viewport with wide eyes. Everything. The ship descended toward a landing platform near the tallest tower in the city, a structure of pale white metal that seemed to glow faintly even in the bright daylight. As the Aurelian's Hope touched down gently, Naira took a slow breath, steadying herself for what was to come. Remember, she said to her companions, we come here to ask, not to demand. We come here to admit our mistakes, not to excuse them. Whatever happens in the next few hours may determine whether the Council survives what is coming. The ship's hatch opened with a soft hiss, and the 3 Council representatives stepped out onto the landing platform. The air outside was clean and cool, carrying a faint scent of flowers from the gardens visible along the tower's edges. Waiting for them was a small group of humans standing calmly near the platform's edge. At the center stood a man Naira recognized immediately from the Council's brief before departure. President Marcus Hale, leader of the United Earth Assembly. He was tall, with gray hair and calm brown eyes that studied the visitors with quiet, careful attention. Beside him stood Commander Sarah Chen, whom they had already spoken with, along with several other officials whose exact roles Naira could not immediately identify. Counselor Vess, President Hale said, extending a hand in a gesture Naira recognized as an old human custom of greeting. Welcome to Earth. It has been a long time since representatives of the Galactic Council stood on our soil. Naira hesitated only a moment before reaching out and accepting the handshake, a gesture unfamiliar to her own species, but one she had studied briefly before the mission. Thank you for receiving us, President Hale. I know our arrival, after so many years of silence, must raise many difficult questions. It raises exactly one question, President Hale said, his voice calm but firm. Why now? Why, after 200 years of forgetting we existed, has the Council suddenly remembered Earth? There was no anger in his voice, but there was no warmth either, just simple, direct honesty, waiting for an equally honest answer. Naira glanced briefly at Grath and Kellen before turning back to President Hale. Because we are desperate, President Hale, and because it is long past time we admitted the truth about why humanity left the Council 200 years ago. Something shifted slightly in President Hale's expression, a flicker of surprise quickly hidden. Go on, he said simply. 2 centuries ago, Naira said, the Council offered your people a provisional seat, a position of lesser status, not out of practicality but out of fear. Fear of how quickly humanity was growing. Fear of what your people might become if treated as true equals. Your leader at the time, Elena Reyes, saw through our excuses and refused to accept a seat without true respect. She was right to do so. President Hale studied Naira carefully for a long moment. Behind him, Commander Chen's expression remained unreadable, though her eyes had sharpened slightly with interest. That is more honesty than I expected from a Council representative, President Hale finally said. Come, let us speak somewhere more private. There is much to discuss, Councillor Vess, and very little time, I think, to discuss it. Inside the tower, in a quiet meeting room overlooking the glowing city below, President Hale listened carefully as Naira explained everything. The Devourer, the failed fleets, the desperate vote in the Great Hall, the decision to finally, after 200 years, ask humanity for help. When she finished, the room was silent for a long moment. We are already aware of the Devourer, President Hale said finally. Our deep space monitoring stations detected its presence 11 months ago, shortly after it first appeared near the Kethrin system. Naira's eyes widened with surprise. 11 months? But the Council only became aware of it 8 months ago when the first colonies went silent. We have been watching the Council's territories for quite some time, Counselor, Commander Chen said, speaking for the first time since entering the room. Not out of hostility, but out of caution. After what happened 200 years ago, humanity decided it would be wise to keep a careful, quiet watch on the wider galaxy, even while choosing not to formally engage with it. You have been studying us, Kellen said slowly, while we forgot you even existed. Yes, President Hale said simply. It seemed the wiser path given the circumstances of our departure. Naira leaned forward slightly. Then you understand the danger the Devourer poses, not just to Council worlds but potentially to all life in this region of the galaxy, including, eventually, Earth itself. President Hale nodded slowly. We have run our own analysis of the threat. Our conclusions are troubling, Counselor. The Devourer is not a natural phenomenon, nor a simple creature. Our scientists believe it to be some form of ancient, self-replicating technology, possibly the remnant of a long-dead civilization, now operating on some kind of automated survival protocol, consuming matter and energy to sustain and multiply itself. Can it be stopped? Naira asked urgently. Possibly, President Hale said carefully, but it will require more than simple weapons or warships. It will require understanding, patience, and cooperation between our peoples on a level that has not existed for 2 centuries. Before Naira could respond, a sharp alarm suddenly echoed through the room. Commander Chen's expression changed instantly, all warmth vanishing as she moved quickly to a nearby console. Report, she said sharply. A voice crackled through a small speaker. Commander, we have a situation. Deep space sensors are detecting massive energy signatures near the outer edge of the solar system. It matches the profile of the Devourer. The room fell into stunned silence. That is impossible, Kellen said, his voice tight with fear. The Devourer was last reported near Kethrin space, months away from Earth at its current speed. Apparently, Commander Chen said grimly, it has grown faster than our projections estimated. President Hale stood quickly. Full alert status. All defense fleets to combat readiness immediately. Chaos erupted calmly and efficiently around them. humans moving with practiced precision despite the danger, coordinating defenses with a speed and confidence that left Naira and her companions stunned. "Counselor Vess," President Hale said, turning back to her with sudden intensity. "It appears your council's crisis has become our crisis far sooner than any of us expected. I need you to contact your ship immediately. Whatever weapons or technology you possess, we may need it. Our weapons have already failed against this thing," Naira said, her voice tight with fear. 12 Zorlak warships gone. An entire company of Drevox warriors gone. "Then perhaps," President Hale said grimly, "it is time to try something different." Within the hour, Naira found herself aboard a human command vessel, far larger and more advanced than the Aurelian's Hope, watching through a massive viewport as the true scale of the threat became clear. The Devourer had arrived at the edge of the solar system, a massive, shifting shape of dark, living metal, larger than any ship or station Naira had ever witnessed. It moved slowly but steadily inward, consuming small asteroids and debris in its path, growing larger with every passing moment. Human warships moved into defensive positions around the outer planets, their formations precise and disciplined, nothing like the chaotic, desperate charges the Zorlak and Drevox fleets had attempted. "They are not attacking directly," Naira observed, watching the human fleet's movements with growing curiosity. "What are they doing?" "Gathering data," Commander Chen said, standing nearby with calm, focused eyes. "Before we act, we must understand exactly what we are facing. Your council's forces charged in with weapons blazing, hoping brute strength alone would be enough. That approach failed. We do not intend to repeat that mistake." As dozens of small probe drones darted around the massive Devourer, gathering scans and readings, Naira watched human scientists working calmly at nearby stations, analyzing the incoming information with quiet, focused intensity. "There," one of the scientists said suddenly. "I have found something. Commander, look at this energy pattern." Commander Chen moved quickly to examine the readings. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the data. "A resonance frequency," she murmured. "The Devourer's outer shell vibrates at a very specific frequency when it consumes matter. If we could disrupt that frequency, we might be able to interrupt its ability to consume material altogether," the scientist finished, excitement creeping into her voice. Naira stared at the two of them, amazed at how quickly they had identified a potential weakness that the Council's scientists had failed to find in 8 months of study. "Can such a weapon be built quickly enough?" Naira asked. "We have been developing resonance-based technology for decades, Counselor," Commander Chen said. "It was originally designed for other purposes, but the principles should apply here as well. Give us 6 hours and we will have a working prototype ready for testing." 6 hours. It seemed impossibly fast. Yet as Naira watched human engineers and scientists work with calm, coordinated precision, she found herself believing, for the first time since this crisis began, that there might truly be hope. 6 hours later, as promised, 3 modified human warships moved into position near the Devourer, their weapon systems glowing with a strange, pulsing blue light, unlike anything Naira had seen before. "Resonance emitters ready," a voice reported over the command channel. President Hale, who had joined the command center personally, gave a firm nod. "Fire on my mark. Target the central mass of the Devourer's structure." The 3 warships fired simultaneously, beams of shimmering blue energy lancing out across the darkness of space, striking the massive dark shape of the Devourer directly at its center. For a long, tense moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly, the Devourer's outer shell began to shudder and crack, faint lines of light spreading across its dark surface like lightning trapped beneath ice. "It's working," the scientist said, her voice filled with disbelief and excitement. "The resonance frequency is disrupting its structural integrity." The Devourer's movement slowed, then stopped entirely, its massive form trembling and cracking further as the resonance beams continued their assault. But then, suddenly, the trembling stopped. The cracks along its surface began to seal themselves, faint light fading back into darkness. "It's adapting," Commander Chen said sharply. "Increase power output now." The warships surged more energy into their beams, but it was too late. The Devourer's shell had already hardened, resistant now to the very frequency that had briefly threatened it. Worse, the massive creature began to move again, faster this time, directly toward the 3 warships that had attacked it. "All ships, retreat immediately," President Hale ordered urgently. But one ship, the smallest of the 3, hesitated for just a moment too long, its engines struggling to disengage from its firing position in time. The Devourer's massive form surged forward, dark tendrils of living metal reaching out toward the trapped warship. "No!" Commander Chen shouted, watching helplessly as the tendrils began wrapping around the smaller ship's hull. The great hall of Vareth Prime was silent, except for the soft hum of 1,000 floating lights above. This hall was the heart of the galaxy. Here, in this round room shaped like a giant eye, the Galactic Council met. Here, the fate of 100 worlds was decided. Around a massive circular table sat the leaders of the galaxy. There were the tall, silver-skinned Zorlak who never smiled. There were the small, quick-eyed Athuna who spoke in whispers. There were the Drevoks with their armored bodies and deep, booming voices. Every great species in the galaxy had a seat here. Every species except one. At the edge of the table between the Zorlak delegation and the Drevoks delegation sat an empty chair. It was old. Dust had settled on its arms. A thin layer of grime covered the small golden plaque fixed to its back. If you leaned close and wiped away the dust, you could still read the word carved into the metal. Earth. For 200 years, that chair had stayed empty. No one alive in the hall today had ever seen a human sit in it. No one alive today had ever spoken to a human at all. Humans were a story now. A rumor. A joke whispered between council members during boring meetings. "Still empty," said Counselor Thessa Vorn, the Zorlak ambassador, looking at the chair with cold eyes. 200 years and still empty. Perhaps we should remove it. Give the space to a species that actually shows up. A few council members laughed. Not loud laughs. Quiet, mocking laughs. The kind of laughs people give when they think they are safe, when they think nothing can ever change. They were offered a place at this table, said another counselor, a Drevox named Bruck Thane. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "We gave them a chance to join the greater community of the galaxy. They refused. They ran back to their little blue planet and hid. Cowards, all of them." "Maybe they were afraid," Thessa said, smiling slightly. "Humans were always a fragile species, short lives, weak bodies. No real technology worth mentioning. It is not surprising they chose to hide rather than stand beside true galactic powers." At the far end of the table, a smaller figure sat quietly. She was Athuna, with soft gray skin and large black eyes that missed nothing. Her name was Counselor Nyra Vess, and unlike the others, she was not laughing. Nyra had spent years studying old records. She had read the reports from the very first contact between the Galactic Council and Earth. She had seen the transcripts. She had seen the images. And unlike the others in this room, she remembered something important. Humans had not run away because they were afraid. They had walked away because they were insulted. But Nyra said nothing. Not yet. In this hall, opinions that went against the powerful species could be dangerous. She had learned to wait, to watch, and to speak only when it truly mattered. Right now, there were more important matters to discuss. A new problem had come to the galaxy. A problem bigger than old arguments about empty chairs. "Let us move to today's true business," said the council speaker, an ancient being named Orun, who had led meetings in this hall for over 300 years. His voice was tired, heavy with worry. "The reports from the outer rim are worse than we feared." The room fell silent. A large screen rose from the center of the table, glowing with a slow-moving image. It showed a section of space near the edge of the galaxy. Stars flickered, ships moved in careful lines, and beyond them, a massive dark shape blocked out the light of a dying sun. It was not a planet. It was not a ship. It was something else. Something that moved like living metal, spreading slowly across space like a disease eating a body. "We are calling it the Devourer," Orun said. It first appeared 8 months ago near the Kethrin system. It consumes everything in its path. Planets, ships, even light itself seems to bend and vanish inside it. 3 colonies have already gone silent. We believe they are gone. Gasps echoed through the hall. Our best scientists cannot explain it. Orun continued. Our best weapons cannot stop it. The Devourer grows larger every day. At its current speed, it will reach the inner systems within 5 years. It will reach the heart of our civilization. Silence. Real silence this time. Not the polite silence of formal meetings, but the heavy silence of fear. What of the Zorlak fleet? Someone asked. Surely with enough warships. We sent our finest warships, Thessa said, her voice suddenly less confident. 12 of our best ships. Only 1 returned. The others simply stopped. Their systems shut down. Their crews vanished. The 1 ship that returned, its captain lost his mind. He still screams in his sleep about shapes in the dark. More murmurs of fear spread across the table. The Drevok sent warriors as well, Bruck Thane admitted quietly, all thunder gone from his voice now. Our strongest soldiers. None returned. Counselor Naira Vess watched all of this with careful eyes. She said nothing, but her mind was working fast. This was the moment. This was the crisis that could change everything. There must be something we have not tried, Orun said, looking around the table with desperate eyes. Some species, some technology, some strategy we have overlooked. The Devourer cannot be allowed to reach our home systems. If it does, billions will die. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Naira Vess stood up. All eyes turned to her. It was rare for the small Athuna counselor to speak in these meetings. Most council members barely remembered she was there. There is one option we have not tried, she said, her voice quiet but clear. One species we have not asked for help. Thessa Vorn raised an eyebrow. And which species is that, counselor? Naira turned her head slightly, just enough to look at the empty chair near the edge of the table. Dust still covered its arms. The golden plaque still read the same word it had read for 200 years. Humans, she said. The reaction was immediate. Laughter broke out from several delegates. Not everyone laughed, but enough did to fill the hall with the sound of mockery. Humans? Thessa said, almost choking on her own amusement. The species that ran away from this very table? The species with weapons 1,000 years behind our own? You want to ask them for help against something that has already defeated our finest warships and warriors? I have studied the old records, Nira said, standing firm despite the laughter. I have seen the reports from First Contact. Humans were never weak. They were never afraid. They chose to leave because they were cowards. Bruck Thane interrupted, some of his old thunder returning. There is no other explanation. A species is offered membership in the greatest alliance in the galaxy, and they refuse. Only fear could explain such a choice. Or pride, Nira said quietly. Or the fact that we treated them like children instead of equals. The room grew quiet again, though this time it was an uncomfortable quiet. Speaker Orun raised a hand, calling for silence. He looked at the empty chair for a long moment, his ancient eyes thoughtful. Counselor Vess, he said slowly, you believe humans could help us against the Devourer? I believe we owe it to every life at risk to at least ask, Naira answered. We have tried everything else. Our fleets have failed. Our warriors have failed. What harm could come from sending one ship to Earth simply to ask? Thessa crossed her arms. The harm, Counselor, is embarrassment. We would be admitting that the Great Galactic Council needs help from a primitive species we once dismissed as unimportant. Better embarrassment than extinction, Naira replied simply. That silenced the room. Orun studied the faces around the table. Fear, doubt, pride, all of it mixed together. Finally, he nodded slowly. We will vote, he said. All those in favor of sending a diplomatic ship to Earth to formally request assistance against the Devourer, raise your hand now. For a moment, no hands rose. Then slowly, hesitantly, Naira Vess raised her own hand first. A few moments later, Speaker Orun raised his as well. Then, one by one, other counselors joined, some out of true hope, others simply because they had run out of better ideas. In the end, the vote passed. Barely, but it passed. Then it is decided, Orun announced. We will send a ship to Earth. We will ask humanity for their help. Thessa Vorn shook her head, disgust clear on her silver face. You are all making a grave mistake. We will look weak. We will look desperate. We are desperate, Naira said calmly. It is time we admitted that to ourselves. As the meeting continued, discussing which ship to send and who would lead the mission, Naira Vess found herself staring again at the empty chair. 200 years of dust. 200 years of silence. 200 years of a galaxy that had forgotten what it truly meant to insult a species and then ask for its help. She wondered quietly what humans had become in all that time. The old records described a species that was clever, stubborn, and fiercely proud despite having far weaker technology than the Council species. But 200 years was a long time. Species could grow. Species could change. Species could become far more than anyone expected, if left alone long enough to do so. Or, she thought with a small chill, species could disappear entirely, fading into memory just like the empty chair suggested. Either way, in 3 days a council ship would leave for the edge of Zorlak space, then jump into the uncharted region where humanity's homeworld was last recorded. No council ship had traveled there in 2 centuries. No one truly knew what they would find when they arrived. Would Earth still exist? Would humans even remember the council that had once turned them away? And if humans still lived, if they still remembered that day 200 years ago when they walked out of this very hall and never returned, would they answer the call for help? Or would the galaxy finally learn in the worst possible way exactly why humans had never come back? As the meeting ended and counselors filed out of the great hall, whispering nervously about the devourer and the strange decision to seek out a forgotten species, one small figure remained behind. Naira Vess walked slowly toward the empty chair. She reached out and gently wiped away some of the dust from the golden plaque, revealing the word beneath it more clearly. Earth, I hope you are still out there, she whispered softly to no one but herself, because I fear we are going to need you very badly. Far away on the other side of the galaxy, near a small yellow star that no council ship had visited in 200 years, a blue and green planet turned slowly in the darkness of space. Lights glowed across its surface, cities stretching farther than any human city had stretched 200 years before. Ships moved silently in orbit around it, sleek and silent, far more advanced than anything the old records described. No one on that planet knew yet that a council ship was preparing to cross the stars toward them. No one knew that an ancient insult was about to be tested by an even more ancient question. Would humanity answer the call? Or had 200 years of silence changed something inside humanity forever? The answer was coming, and it would shake the entire galaxy to its core. The council ship Aurelian's Hope moved through the black silence of deep space, its silver hull cutting through the dark like a blade. Inside, 3 council representatives sat in nervous silence, watching the stars blur past the viewport as the ship prepared for its final jump toward the region once known as human space. Counselor Naira Vess sat near the front of the ship, her large black eyes fixed on the navigation screen. Beside her sat a young Zorlak officer named Kellen Dre, sent by Thessa Vorn to keep an eye on things, though everyone understood his true purpose was to make sure this mission failed quietly and without embarrassment to the Zorlak people. Then unexpectedly a second wave of human ships surged forward from a hidden formation behind the outer planets, their weapon systems already charged and ready. They opened fire immediately, not with the resonance beams, but with powerful conventional weapons, focused entirely on the tendrils gripping their trapped comrade. The combined firepower tore through the dark tendrils, freeing the smaller ship just moments before the Devourer's grip could fully close. All ships full retreat, President Hale ordered again, and this time every human vessel disengaged smoothly, falling back to safer positions as the Devourer, momentarily confused by the sudden loss of its target, slowed its advance. In the command center, Tense silence gave way to quiet relief as the retreating fleet cleared the immediate danger zone. "We lost no ships," Commander Chen reported, her voice tight but steady. "Minor damage to 3 vessels. No casualties." Naira stared at the viewport in stunned amazement. No casualties. Against a creature that had destroyed entire fleets of Zorlak and Drevox warships without mercy, humanity had engaged, tested their weapons, adapted in real time, and retreated without losing a single life. "That was," Kellen began, struggling to find the right words. "Extraordinary," Grath finished quietly, his ancient eyes filled with something like awe. President Hale turned to face Naira directly, his expression serious but calm. "The resonance weapon alone will not be enough, Counselor. The Devourer adapts too quickly for a single approach to succeed. We will need a combined strategy, multiple approaches working together, likely requiring far greater resources than Earth alone possesses." "Then you will help us?" Naira asked, hope rising in her voice. President Hale studied her carefully for a long moment before answering. "I did not say that, Counselor Vess. What I am saying is that Earth is willing to continue gathering information, and Earth is willing to defend itself and any allies within reach against this threat, regardless of the Council's involvement. But full cooperation," Commander Chen added, "full commitment of Earth's forces and resources to this crisis, that is a decision our Assembly will need to make together, formally and carefully." Naira nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what was being asked. 200 years of insult and silence could not be erased in a single day, no matter how urgent the crisis. "Then I ask formally," Naira said, straightening with quiet determination, "on behalf of the Galactic Council, that Earth's leadership consider full cooperation against this threat, not as a lesser partner, not as a provisional seat, but as full and equal allies, with full respect and full voice in every decision made." President Hale was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "There will be a formal assembly meeting within the next day," he finally said. "Your request and the full truth of what has happened here today will be presented for consideration. I cannot promise you the answer you hope for, Counselor Vess, but I can promise you an honest one." As the command center returned to careful, focused activity around them, Naira found herself staring out at the distant, shifting shape of the Devourer, still visible at the edge of the system, patient and dangerous. The galaxy's fate now rested, at least in part, on a decision humanity alone would make, and far away, back in the great hall of Vareth Prime, an empty chair still waited, gathering dust, as the entire council anxiously awaited news of what was happening on a planet they had forgotten for 200 years. The Earth Assembly Hall was unlike anything Naira Vess had expected. It was simple, almost plain compared to the grand, glowing architecture of the council's great hall. Rows of seats rose in a gentle curve around a central speaking platform, filled now with representatives from every nation and colony of humanity. Hundreds of faces watching quietly as President Hale prepared to address them. Naira stood near the back of the hall, alongside Kellen and Grath, watching nervously as President Hale stepped up to the platform. Commander Chen stood close by, her expression calm but alert, as always. "Representatives of Earth," President Hale began, his voice carrying easily through the hall without need for amplification. 200 years ago, our ancestors made a difficult choice. They walked away from an alliance that offered us a seat, but not respect. A voice, but no true power to use it. The hall was silent, every eye fixed on their leader. "Today, that same council has returned," President Hale continued, "not to offer us a provisional seat this time, but to ask for our help. A threat unlike anything they have faced before, one they call the Devourer, threatens not only their worlds, but potentially our own as well, should it continue unchecked." Murmurs spread through the hall, quiet but intense. "I will not stand here and pretend the decision before us is simple," President Hale said. 2 centuries of silence cannot be erased by a single request for help, however urgent. And yet, I ask each of you to consider carefully what kind of people we wish to be. Not only for ourselves, but for every world that might one day look to us as the Council once looked to our ancestors, hoping for compassion instead of pride. He paused, letting his words settle over the hall. We tested our strength against this threat only yesterday, he continued. We proved that where the Council's brute force failed, our patience and precision succeeded, at least partially. We proved that we are no longer the primitive, fragile species the Council once dismissed. We are equals now in every sense that matters. The question before us is simple. Do we choose to act like it? Silence stretched through the hall as representatives considered his words carefully. Finally, an older woman near the front of the assembly rose slowly to her feet. Naira recognized her from earlier briefings as Representative Amara Okafor, one of the most respected voices in the Earth Assembly. President Hale, she said, her voice steady and clear. I have listened carefully to everything you have shared, and I find myself asking a different question. Not whether the Council deserves our help, but whether the countless innocent lives at risk, lives that had no part in the mistakes made 200 years ago, deserve to suffer for decisions made by leaders long since gone. She looked around the hall slowly. We are not the same people who were insulted 2 centuries ago. We have grown, we have changed, and perhaps it is time we prove that growth means more than simply becoming stronger. It means becoming wiser and kinder than those who wronged us. Quiet nods spread through parts of the hall. Another representative rose, a younger man with sharp, thoughtful eyes. I understand the sentiment, Representative Okafor, but we cannot ignore history entirely. If we simply forgive and forget, what lesson does that teach? That any power can insult us, ignore us for centuries, and then expect our help the moment they find themselves in trouble? No one is asking you to forget, Naira said suddenly, surprising even herself as she stepped forward from the back of the hall. Every eye turned toward her. President Hale gave a small nod, silently granting her permission to speak. I am not asking Earth to forget what happened 200 years ago, Naira continued, her voice steady despite her nervousness. I am asking you to remember it clearly, and then decide for yourselves what kind of galaxy you wish to help build. The Council I represent made a terrible mistake born from fear and pride. We have lived with the consequences of that mistake for 2 centuries, an empty chair in the middle of our great hall that no one has dared to fill. She paused, looking around the silent hall. I do not ask you to sit in that chair as it once was offered, small and without true voice. I ask Earth to help us tear that old chair away completely and build a new one built on true equality, true respect, and true partnership. Not because you owe us anything, but because countless innocent lives just as real and precious as your own, now depend on the choice you make today. The hall remained silent for a long moment after Naira finished speaking. Then slowly, President Hale turned back to face the assembly. The choice is yours, representatives. I will not make this decision alone. Not after everything our ancestors sacrificed to ensure Earth's voice would never again be silenced or diminished by fear or pride, from within or beyond our own world. We vote, he said simply. All those in favor of formal cooperation with the Galactic Council against the threat known as the Devourer, as full and equal partners, raise your hand now. For a tense moment, no one moved. No one. Then slowly, Representative Okafor raised her hand first. A moment later, others began to follow, hesitant at first, then with growing confidence, until the majority of the hall's representatives had raised their hands in agreement. President Hale studied the room carefully, then nodded slowly. The motion passes. Earth will stand with the Galactic Council against the Devourer as full and equal partners. Relief flooded through Naira's chest, so intense it nearly brought tears to her eyes. But, President Hale added, his voice suddenly firm and serious, turning to look directly at Naira, this partnership comes with conditions, Councillor Vess. Conditions I expect the Council to accept fully without hesitation or compromise. Name them, Naira said immediately. Earth will not accept a provisional seat, President Hale said clearly. We will accept a full and permanent seat, with full voting power, equal to any other species on the Council, from this day forward. We will not be treated as junior partners, Nor will we be dismissed or overlooked simply because 2 centuries have passed since we were last truly seen. Agreed, Nira said without hesitation. Furthermore, President Hale continued, any decisions regarding strategy against the Devourer will require full consultation and agreement from Earth's command, not simple notification after decisions have already been made. Agreed, Nira said again. President Hale studied her for a long moment. Then finally a small, genuine smile crossed his face. Then, Counselor Vess, it seems Earth is ready to return to the Galactic Council, not as the species that once walked away, but as the species the galaxy will learn to respect. 3 days later, the Great Hall of Vareth Prime was filled once again, every council member present waiting anxiously for news of the mission's outcome. Whispers filled the room as the Aurelian's Hope was reported inbound, along with several additional vessels that had not been part of the original mission. When the massive doors of the Great Hall finally opened, silence fell instantly across the room. Nira Vess entered first, walking calmly toward her usual place at the table. Behind her came Grath Dune and Kellen Dre, both looking changed somehow, as if the experience on Earth had shifted something deep within them. But it was the figures who entered last that caused the entire hall to fall into stunned, disbelieving silence. President Marcus Hale walked steadily into the Great Hall, Commander Sarah Chen at his side, followed by a small delegation of human representatives, all moving with calm, quiet confidence, despite the weight of 200 years of history pressing down around them. Whispers erupted through the hall, disbelief and shock clear on every face. Humans, Thessa Vorn breathed, staring in open astonishment. They actually came. President Hale walked directly toward the center of the room, stopping beside the old dust-covered chair that had sat empty for 2 centuries. He looked down at it for a long moment, studying the faded golden plaque, before reaching out and gently brushing away the last of the dust that remained. Earth. The word gleamed clearly now, catching the light of the hall's floating lamps. 200 years ago, President Hale said, his voice calm but powerful, carrying easily across the silent hall. My people were offered this chair, not as equals, but as subjects to be watched and controlled, feared for our potential, rather than respected for our worth. He looked around the hall slowly, meeting the eyes of council members who had once mocked the very idea of humanity's return. We refused that chair then, and rightly so. But today we return, not because we have forgotten that insult, but because we choose to rise above it. Because countless innocent lives now depend on unity, not old grudges. Because true strength is not shown by refusing to help those who wronged us, but by helping them anyway, on our own terms, as true equals. He placed his hand gently on the back of the old chair. Humans do not bow, counselors. We never have, and we never will. But we are willing to stand beside you shoulder to shoulder, as partners in the fight against a threat greater than any of us can face alone. Speaker Arun rose slowly from his seat at the head of the table, his ancient eyes filled with something like humble respect. Then let it be recorded, before this entire council, that Earth's seat is no longer provisional. From this day forward, Earth stands as a full and equal member of the Galactic Council, with full voice, full vote, and full respect, precisely as it should have been offered 2 centuries ago. President Hale studied the old speaker for a long moment, then gave a small, firm nod. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled the old chair back and sat down, the ancient wood creaking softly beneath him, filled for the very first time in 200 years. The great hall remained silent for a long moment, the weight of history settling over everyone present. Then, unexpectedly, Counselor Nira Vess began to clap, slow and steady at first, then growing stronger. One by one, other council members joined her, until the entire hall echoed with applause, respect finally given where it had long been overdue. Even Thessa Vorn, though her expression remained carefully composed, offered a small, respectful nod toward the newly filled human seat. In the days that followed, the combined forces of the Galactic Council and Earth worked tirelessly together. Human resonance technology combined with council resources and knowledge, developing new strategies and weapons against the ever-growing threat of the Devourer. The battle ahead would be long and difficult, no one doubted that. The Devourer remained a terrible, dangerous unknown, capable of adapting and growing stronger with each passing day. But for the first time since the crisis began, hope had truly returned to the galaxy. Hope built not on desperation or fear, but on genuine partnership between two peoples who had finally learned to see each other as true equals. Back in the Great Hall of Vareth Prime, the old chair that had once gathered dust for 2 centuries now stood proudly among the others, its golden plaque gleaming brightly, no longer a symbol of forgotten shame, but of hard-earned respect. Word of Earth's return spread quickly across every world connected to the Council, whispered among traders, soldiers, and citizens alike. Stories grew and spread, some exaggerated, some understated, but all carrying the same simple truth at their core. Humanity had not hidden away in fear 200 years ago. They had walked away with quiet dignity, built something far greater than anyone believed possible, and returned only when they were ready on their own terms, as equals rather than subjects. And across the galaxy, in quiet conversations among beings of every species, a simple phrase began to spread, whispered first with disbelief, then repeated with growing respect, and even a little fear. Humans bow to no one. Far away, at the very edge of known space, the massive, shifting form of the Devourer continued its slow, relentless advance, unaware that the very species it might soon face in battle had finally found the strength and the humility to stand united once again. The chair was filled, the alliance was reborn, and the galaxy, for the first time in 2 centuries, remembered exactly why humanity's seat had always deserved to be anything but empty.